Hi, this is Pastor Jamie with Covenant Church with our sermon recap. This past Sunday, we talked about the cure for self-interest. Ecclesiastes 4, 1 through 16 was the passage that we found ourselves in. And it says, "Again I saw that all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. And on the side of the oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But even better than both is he who has not yet been and has not yet seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun." We see that the Solomon is making an accusation that in the world there is only the oppressed and the oppressor, only the victim and the victimizer. You know, none of us want to think that we are a victim. But think about that supervisor that may have come into your job. That when he came in, what do they typically do? They make changes, not because change is needed, but because they want people to know that good things are happening because it was on their watch. Have you ever seen someone come into a position of authority and instantly try to insulate themselves to gain power, to protect their power? Have you ever had a supervisor or someone that was in charge of you blame you for something, not because you did it, but because if they take blame, it would threaten their power? I think we've all been there. You see, what ultimately makes an oppressor is the allure of power. You see, power is intoxicating no matter who you are. And you want to keep it at all costs. You see, the people that are the oppressors are those that have the power. But we have to also understand that the powerless or the poor are not blameless. You see, we talked about how in our culture, or in our society, that we make out Robin Hood as this great character, that he robbed from the rich in order to give to the poor, that the rich were the ones that were corrupt, and that him stealing from them was justified because the poor deserved it. We see the core desire, though, to get out of that cycle of oppression is still rooted in envy. It's still rooted in the desire and the envy to have the power that the powerful have. In verse 4 we say, "Then I saw all the toil and skill and work come from man's envy of his neighbor." And this was also vanity and striving after the wind. You see, this is a true representation of the world that we live in. It's not just about dictators or governments. It's not just about Republican or Democrat. This is a result of one thing, and that is sin. Now, what's the solution? You see, we talked about how the world is in a constant cycle of oppression. They are, like we said last week, looking to get as much as they can, no matter who they have to trample over to get it. This really is the definition of egoism. Now, egoism is self-interest. It's the relentless pursuit of self-interest. And the cure for egoism is building relationships in order for others to receive the benefit. You see, even Solomon saw this solution. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone, for when he fails, he has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. You see, we see the only remedy is first rooted in the desire to walk with them. What do we see in this verse? They can get up with help. They can be fed with help. They can be safe with help. You see, we need to build relationships using what we talked about the last couple weeks, and that is the God filter. We have to first see, is this relationship ultimately meant to glorify God? Secondly, and importantly, is this relationship meant to build up the other person? And is this relationship going to allow me to stay rooted in God's plan and desire and call for my life? You see, the best example we see from this is ultimately Jesus. When he was talking to the woman that was accused of adultery. When they drug her into the city square, what did Jesus do? He called them to him who was without sin to cast the first stone. You see, ultimately Jesus was the only one in the crowd that who had no sin. And yet, what did Jesus do? Jesus gave grace. And our example is ultimately set in Jesus Christ. What are we supposed to do with people that may not have earned or may not deserve our affection or our work? We are still called to give it to them. To give them grace, because that grace was first given to us. You see, the world is already attacking one another. That this cycle of oppression that we talked about is ultimately just tearing people down, digging them deeper and deeper in this hole of self-interest. And what we as believers are called to do is to walk with those people and love them, not because of what they can do for us, but ultimately because what God has done for us. You see, that is what it's about in the Christian life. We are called ultimately to love. Jesus said that in Matthew 22, didn't he? When they tried to trip him up, they asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And upon these two things hang the entire law and prophets. We are called to love. And we allow God to do the work. Would you come join us this Sunday? Worship starts at 10:15 as we continue our series in the book of Ecclesiastes. Have a wonderful day. Bye.